Hello, I'm Jules, and this is Lisa. Say hi, Lisa.
Hi. Hey, everybody.
And this is the Crystalline Channel. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the signs of awakening. This is actually one of my favorite topics, just because kind of, if you missed the first episode, definitely go back where we talked about what is awakening. And I feel like taking all of that and bringing it into this part of the conversation is important because when we think of awakening, it's not just when we first awaken and we have this big shift of going from maybe where we were creating a life of being unconscious to a life where we are conscious, but we're going to have those times over and over again. We're always going to be awakening in different aspects of our life. And what happens when that we go from an unconscious behavior to a conscious behavior has symptoms, if you will. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really an important subject. And because as we're moving through this time, like you said, Jules, is that, we may have this major event of awakening, but then we have to adjust to the energy shift. And then we have another little jolt of energy, and then we have to adjust to that. And there's so many signs that are so common with people that are going through this thing. And we may want to just start with, what are the most basic things that people are commenting about or complaining about or going, wow, what's happening to me? I'm losing my mind. So do you want to start, Jules, with some examples?
Yeah, no, one of the biggest examples, it's not really an example, but I feel like let's start with what does it feel like? What is behind all of this? And then we can start to add in all the examples. But this is one of my favorite ways of explaining an awakening is that you have this room that you're sitting in and it's you have a little candle. And so the only things that you can see in the room is what the candle is able to light up. And then all of a sudden somebody walks in and starts turning the light and one of the dim lights where it starts to turn it up and up and up. And for some people it goes really slowly and then they can start to see more and they're like, yeah, well, I don't think I want this in my life anymore and I don't
Mm-hmm.
align with that anymore. And all of a sudden it starts to kind of illuminate. But for some people, it's somebody comes and turns the light on, and all of a sudden they're in this room where they're like, oh, this is not where I want to be. I do not want to live my life in this room. And so, depending on what your experience is, the symptoms of what that's going to feel like are going to vary as well. But that's one of my favorite ways of kind of explaining what can happen when we wake up because all of a sudden what we thought was what we wanted isn't anymore.
Right, right. And what we thought what is isn't anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, and our belief systems start changing, our environment starts changing, we start feeling uncomfortable around people that we've been around our entire lives, lifelong friends, our simple things like you start forgetting stuff. You know, and it's we start having physical shifts and transitions. Maybe heart palpitations is really common,
Mhm.
muscle aches. Fatigue. These things that we start questioning about what's going on. We don't know how to discern, and really literally, am I losing my mind? What does my body ache so bad? Why can't I remember what happened 3 days ago? All of these things that happen, that is all very much a part of these energy shifts that are happening within us.
Mhm.
And so what I've had conversations with people about is people really don't know the difference between, is this actually a physical ailment or is it an energy shift? And so that's really what I want to kind of talk about. And so do we want to start with, maybe let's just start with how the mind is shifting and changing?
Yeah, it's so interesting here. We're a lot of forgetfulness,
Yeah.
and I think of that in that because when we wake up, there is an actual, like what you were saying, a frequency shift or a shift in the vibration that we're holding. It's like, and it is like almost something that kind of breaks open, and as that break open, a frequency of a higher nature is released. So if you want to call that divine, universal, God, whatever feels right for you, is activated in your body. And so your body that was in the state of the unawakening or the unconscious or a state of density that was just running this program was shooken up, and all of a sudden this new frequency that's a lot higher is released, and so the body is trying to move up into this new frequency. And so your body's going to have a reaction to that, your mind is going to have a reaction to that, and your reality is going to have a reaction to that, because these are two different realities or timelines, you could say. And so when we're having this new frequency come through, all of a sudden we're going to have different perspectives, and the way that we see reality is going to change. And there may be times where we're actually drop back down into this, and then we kind of shift back up to this, and then we're like, okay, that's when we feel like we're literally living in two different worlds. And you hear that a lot.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the way that my guides have shown it to me is, it's like we're wired together. Like our brain has this wiring in it. And as we're going through this shift, it's like everything's starting to get unplugged, and it starts getting pulled apart. So the old belief system of, I don't know, maybe I'm just making this up. I mean, I'm just trying to pull something out of the air, but maybe it's the way that you feel like somebody should dress, people should dress. Like, because it's something that's a core issue. And maybe I'm just going back to myself. My mom taught me as a child, to be very covered up, and I'm not supposed to show my shoulders.
And then like we're exact opposite.
Yeah, but this is a perfect example, because like she put a belief system in my head that, like not ever to wear a sundress. Now, I was a child, I was born in the 60s. And so, obviously her perspective was what nice girls do, coming back from, the way that she was raised, and, in the 50s and the 60s. And so she was very conservative in the way that I should present myself. So my belief system was so ingrained in the way that she taught me that to wear a sundress, it became uncomfortable for me. I feel too exposed. So if my shoulders were filling the air, then I felt like I got to cover up, because it was such a belief system that was ingrained in my mind from the way that I was conditioned to believe. So as we're going through this rewiring, a belief system like that is so confining, and that puts you in such a box, that creates judgment of others when they dress a certain way or look a certain way. This is the type of things that we can start noticing of, where did this belief system isn't as strong as it used to be. I think it feels kind of good to have the air on my shoulders as I'm covered up. But what we can start noticing is that maybe a long held belief system that was so ingrained, that created our confinement, that created us to judge others, or to put labels on people, put them in boxes, and constrict and restrict others and ourselves, are starting to be pulled apart a little bit more. And so I might find now that, well, who cares? That dress is beautiful and it doesn't have sleeves. Wear it. Wear what makes you happy, not what somebody told me that I could do or couldn't do. And so this is obviously, this is a really blatant example. There's a lot more subtle examples, that we can start looking at your life to where you may start recognizing that that's not relevant anymore. And I don't want to feel, it feels uncomfortable to be in that confinement. I don't want to be confined anymore. So this little wiring is becoming disconnected. You're undoing it. And then you're getting rewired to understand that, no, it's okay. You can get out of that box. You can be free. And so what I'm finding is that more and more of the mental aspects are, those old belief systems are getting pulled apart, and this beautiful new energy is coming in and restructuring our brains and rewiring us to find a little bit more freedom, to find that little place of peace, to be more accepting, more loving, more compassionate, less judgmental, less hard on ourselves. And so as we're moving through this and you start finding that there's a little bit more freedom in you and that you're a little bit softer in the way that you're thinking, it takes a little bit of time to adjust to it. Sometimes it can be just like that, and sometimes you go back and forth. Should I, shouldn't I? Is it okay if I do that? Is there something wrong if I'm okay with this now? And this is where I think where people start struggling is that, this is the way I've always been, but now I'm not so sure that it fits me anymore. And this is when we start finding that I don't fit with the same people that I used to. I don't enjoy doing the things that I used to. I don't feel comfortable with hating, like I used to. And that's why we're going through these shifts of relationships dissolving, old ways of being dissolving, and that we're moving into a new way, which creates solitude. One of the other examples that people talk about a lot is that I feel like I don't want to be around people. I don't like my job anymore. I want to be at home. I like being in my own space. And there's a reason why this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great place to kind of go to back to when we wake up, our frequency is going to rise. And so when we were choosing a life of what you call hating or judgment and confinement of our programming really is what it is that if when we're living an unconscious life, we're living through programming of the collective, of how we were brought up, through our the limitations we put on ourselves, and also our wounds are, they're all controlling the narrative of our life. And then when we wake up, we start to have a choice of, does that feel good to me anymore? And when we also wake up, that divine frequency starts to kind of run through our consciousness. And what you called softens is that we really start to kind of go back into our innate state of being. And we realize, you know what? I get to honor who I am. I get to start saying yes to what feels right for me. And what feels right when we're in that state of awakening, normally, not always, but normally isn't aligning with what maybe you were choosing before. And so you have these two different realities. And so when you have this reality of the people, your jobs, the things that you agreed to don't fit anymore, the nice thing about it is that we know what the two feel like. Like, we may not be self-actualized in the awakening process or this new frequency that we're starting to explore, but we know that we don't want to go back, right? Because that's the one thing, is that when you awaken, you have a choice. And that is, either I'm going to change or I'm not. But either way, you're going to choose it consciously. And that creates a different vibration. It creates a different way of living, because you can't go back to being unconscious. Once you know, right? And so it may be that we choose not to change, even though we know that it's not right for us, but at least we're choosing it consciously. And I think that there's a lot of value in that, because if we're not ready for the change, at least we know that we're choosing it because we're not ready for the change.
Right.
And then when we are, we go through the transition of, what do I want my life to look like now? And that there is some solitude in that, because there's a self-actualization in this new rewiring of the way that we experience life, and we start to take away all of the density and the judgment, and we allow it to be replaced with what is more in alignment with our heart, you could say, or with the divine within us. And what we start to realize is that has a specific feeling in our body. And when we can kind of stabilize in that feeling when we're alone in the solitude. Like, I like being in my sacred space,
Yeah.
right? We all feel that. And then when we go back out into the world and we have trouble holding on to that frequency, we just want to go back home.
Yeah.
But that's only because there's a new alignment of having that be so stable that when you go out into the world, that the world will match that, because you have created a new reality based on the frequency that you're stabilizing. So it's good to test that, and there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you know it's going to take a little more effort for me to choose from this new alignment of the frequency that I'm holding than it did before, because I'm rewiring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the way that I see it is, that's the perfect example. Exactly what you're saying is that, those of us that are moving through this energy quicker, sooner, earlier than what some of the other people are behind. And we know we're doing this in waves. And there's a certain group of us, and this isn't a hierarchy by any means, but there were some of us that are like, hey, I'm going to go first because we're going to kind of pave the way to figure out how to do this in our human bodies. And what I found, or what I'm finding, is that there's no owner manual on how to do this. It's literally, we are going day by day, and every single one of us is like, okay, how do I do this? Here's my experience today. I'm just going to try to get through it. Your experience is different. My experience is different. Every person's experience is a little bit different, having all the same symptoms, but how we figure out how to maneuver through it is our decision. Is how we've got to figure out our own footing to be able to maneuver through it. But one of the things that has become aware to me is that this place going into the solitude, it's almost like we're anchoring in that energy, and it's kind of like how you said it. It's like we're adjusting to it, so that we can hold the energy, that we understand, okay, this is how my personality is changing, this is how my likes are changing, this is how my relationships with others are changing, but I'm integrating this higher frequency. So it's there. I'm hearing the word incubation, incubate. Like a little egg and that little thing that will create the hatching. And it's kind of like we're incubating in our own space in order to integrate and to become used to and to be able to hold on to this newer frequency, so that when we do go out into the world, then we can figure out, now I really feel the difference. Now I can see the lower frequencies and the higher frequencies, and I can kind of feel what's going on. And for me personally, sometimes I'm affected, and not a very positive way, because I find that my old 3D way jumps back in, and then I recognize, okay, get back to your higher frequency, and start integrating and pulling in that higher frequency. So being able to understand, like what you're saying, is that, okay, well, I'm in my nice little safe space, and I can feel the energy, and I'm having my quiet time, and I'm feeling the shifts and the changes. But we are living in a 3D world. We have to go out there, to the masses. Most of us have jobs, or dealing with kids or families or husbands or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But the test is exactly what you're saying, is to be able to go out there and hold your energy frequency. And that's what we're moving to, so that the more of us, that this first wave of people that can fully integrate, hold that energy, go out there to the masses, that's when we become the change makers. Mm-hmm. That are spreading our energy, our light, to be able to allow others to see who we are. But this isn't easy. It's a challenge. It's hard. Mm-hmm. And we understand that, but we want you guys, people that are watching, to understand that it's a struggle. This is not an easy road. And for those of us that are doing it for the first time, none of us have a plan. It literally is one day at a time, and being able to figure out, okay, now I'm going out there to the masses, and this feels really uncomfortable. Do I need to change something about this? Or do I need to change me? Or how do I integrate everything to where I can flow through it and be able to hold on to the energy pattern that's being created within me and no longer be affected by the outside?
Absolutely. One thing that keeps coming to me that I feel like, especially in maybe the beginning stages of a frequency shift, and not even just our first awakening, which because we're always upgrading on this path, is our frequency is always going to be raising, and we're going to be adjusting to that. Is that in those adjustments is a lot of times when we're shown the things that we need to release, because it's so easy to go out into the world and have the world not align with our new frequency, right? And we put blame on on the person or the situation of, oh, they, that was so hard, I lost my frequency, and we want to put the blame. And really, as a way shower, and as we really start to walk the path of awakening with sovereignty, is that we have to turn around and be like, okay, well, that's my responsibility to, and how I'm walking away and what I feel is my responsibility. So what is this showing me? And with that, life becomes an ascension, a tool, because it's always going to be showing you what density is, yeah, holding you down, right? It's holding you down, or because when it all comes down to it, we know what it feels like to be in alignment. We have the, when we're in our sovereignty and when we're in our safe place, when we're kind of in our own energy and we can connect to source, that has a certain feeling. And that feeling is what we can bring into the world in all aspects. And so when we know that when that feeling alters, it's on us. It's like, wow, okay, what program did this trigger or did this hold that I need to look at and shift it, rewire it back into the frequency of source? Because that's what we're here to do, is to create the new earth. And the way that we create the new earth is to see the divine in all things.
Yeah, and I had a really interesting vision the other day, and talking about that the people like us that are going through this, when we can fully stand in this beautiful energy light, that it creates a blanket. It's a connection between all of us that are vibrating on the same frequency. And if you look at it, the frequency of hate and fear and anger and, and agitation or anxiety, that's a blanket. And it's like everybody that's holding on to that energy frequency, it's like that frequency connects to one another, that creates this whole blanket. But then when you pull everything apart, you see that it's individual. It's every individual that is holding that frequency of energy that is connecting to everybody else that has the same frequency, and it creates this blanket. So the way that we're functioning now is that we are holding on to, the majority, the masses are holding on to that deep, dense frequency, the fear and the anxiety and the greed and all that stuff, the power energy and all that junk. And that's why we are where we are today. But the more that you and I and all of us look at ourselves as an individual and change what's within us to raise our frequency to the love frequency, to the gratitude frequency, to the equality in frequency, this beautiful divine energy, then when I achieve this within me, and you achieve it, and you achieve it, and you achieve it, then we start creating that blanket. And so it's so important for us to be able to recognize that this is my assignment. This is why we're on Earth, is to be able to maneuver through this beautiful shift and change to create this blanket energy that's meant to surround the earth and what's coming. The way that the old energy did, we're breaking the old energy down to create the new energy.
Yeah. There's like, as you're talking, I could just, I always like to kind of go to what the experience is kind of in our humanness, and then what's actually happening outside
Mhm.
of that, right? And because there's another energy behind all of this, and our humanness is having the experience of that. And we are in the big this year, right, is like one of the biggest shifts of mankind, if not the biggest.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a mass awakening. I mean, we already are seeing it happen.
Mhm.
And so, in that, it's, I think, going back to that blanket that you were talking about, is that you're not alone, right? It feels like it's very personal and it's very alone, because we have to be responsible for honoring the divine within us and shining that light into the world. So, that is a personal choice and a personal devotion that we do every single day. And in that, we have to navigate all of the changes when we go from a denser, low vibrational frequency into a high one, because that's a shift of a reality. I mean, it just truly is. And that's going to have certain symptoms. It's going to have certain emotions. And one thing I think it's worth even saying is that our body a lot of time will start to release cortisol because it knows that it's changing. And if we're not aware that it's our body just trying to keep us safe, is when we really start to go on the roller coaster, because we have this divine frequency that's saying, yeah, follow that, go this way, and then our body's like, no, don't change, don't change. And so we're like, oh, what do I do? And it can feel very chaotic. But that awareness that, okay, I can feel uncomfortable and I can feel afraid and still say yes to moving forward. And that's really what it is to be a way shower, is
Mhm.
because it is uncomfortable, because we are doing it for the first time. But knowing that behind our human experience of that, there's another energy that is truly supporting. And I was just saying this the other day, that I particularly feel this kind of July onward, and as we move towards the 11/11 portal, I'm getting chills as I'm about to say this, but it's almost as if there's these hands of just like this supportive divine energy that's coming in and saying, okay, you've been doing it.
Mhm.
You've been working so hard, and and now it's time to just like ride the wave. Just
Yep.
let us take you in our hands, and you're gonna ride the magic carpet ride.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because today is we're July of 2026. And what I've been feeling is that, the last couple of months, several months, have like brought us to the peak. It's like, we're gonna kick your tail. We're gonna make it so hard on you, and your body's gonna shake and itch. I don't know where that came from. I'm not recognizing the itching, but anyway, but shake and itch, and you're going to have all of the fears and the anxiety of the shifting, the changing, and what am I ready to let go of the past? Is it okay if I do? And am I going to be safe moving into the future, like what you were saying? So it's like we've got push, 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 push to where, okay, now you've been making the decisions, you've been making the changes, and so now you've reached your peak. And so now what I feel like is, again, until November from now through the next several of months, is okay, now I'm starting to feel my groove. Now I'm starting to figure out how to live in this energy. And I've talked to people, numerous people that, are having the same experience. It's like we've gone through the roughest part, and now we're just figuring out that, okay, now I can do this. And now I'm starting to figure out how to go with the flow. Now I'm recognizing that I can let go of the control. I can start listening to the inner voice, and I can start going with the rhythm without fear or anxiety about making the choices and worrying about what's going to happen in the future. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think just to kind of wrap all this up, is kind of going back to the symptoms, is that life just changes, right? And but yeah, I had this teacher way back when I was I don't know, I was in my 20s, and every time I would bring something to her, she would be like, the most consistent thing is change. And I was like, yeah, but I don't feel good about it. But what she taught me was, if you're not uncomfortable, you're stagnant.
Yeah.
You're not growing and you're not evolving. And I really took that to heart. And it's something I actually taught my kids too, is always be on the edge of being uncomfortable until you feel comfortable in the uncomfortable. And that becomes your way of life, because then you know that you're always kind of expanding outside of what I call your programming or the limitations, those boxes that you were talking about. And then we don't have to have these like huge awakenings all the time. I mean, they're going to happen. We're always going to become conscious of things that we weren't conscious of, but then it becomes exciting. And that's kind of what I want to end with, is that awakening for the first time, I feel like doesn't have to be hard. That it can be joyful, it can be exciting, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to have challenges. But we know, like kind of what I was just saying, that there's this energy behind this, that every time that we say yes to that energy and move forward in our evolution, that we are truly creating heaven on earth. And we are witnessing that each time that we do it. And so it's not like what it used to be. It's we are in a completely different state on a mass awakening where together we are truly creating the new earth, and it's more exciting than ever.
It is. And my guides call it the amazement park.
Ah,
So, yeah. So what, it's like if we can start shifting our way of thinking and looking at, instead of being fearful of change and oh my gosh, what's going to happen, and having that panic attack and living in that phase, what if we changed our idea or our belief of, oh my God, what's going to happen next? I know I have to let go of something in order to be open to whatever the next adventure is. So instead of walking in this confined idea, being able to be open and walk into the amazement park, not the amusement park, but the amazement park of life, and watch what's going on around you and all the magic. Literally, I'm seeing Disneyland right now.
I love that.
And that's what we have the ability to do. And here we are. Let's
Yeah.
grasp onto it.
Yeah, it's time to experience the miracle pattern. That's what I call it. It's the miracle pattern, because there's always these. It's the divine treasure hunt. It is truly that. So well, I guess that will be the kind of takeaway is, maybe looking in your life of where you're maybe resisting change just a little bit, and just ask that the universe or the divine, whatever feels right for you, that word there, to just give it a little bit of a little poof of magic, and see how, if your perspective of it changes just a little bit, and know that the behind that, when we say no to what's not in alignment for us, it opens the door for what is. And I say that to my daughters all the time, is that when we stay in that resistance to change, that we can't fully step into what our next is, because we're kind of like holding on to, well, I kind of want this, but I am not ready to let go of this, and it creates this contraction, and creates contraction in our body, but it also creates in our mind, and what we like, how our reality is showing us that, and it's like nothing ever really happens, and we feel stuck. And then all of a sudden we decide to let go, and everything just starts to move, and our heart opens, and we feel the momentum, we feel the support. And that's really where the magic is that when we recognize that before it gets really tight and it feels like such a huge thing, if we can just recognize it a little bit at a time and just make those little tiny choices along the way that are in alignment. And that's really, I would say, the base of awakening, is to learn to say yes to that stillness, that soft voice, not to the emotion, but to that divine knowing. And when we can learn to do that over and over again, a lot of that constriction and fear of change starts to just kind of fade away.
And that's the goal.
Yeah.
Living from the inner knowing, and not being fearful to trust it.
Yeah. So, everybody today, let's all say yes to one still voice within us that is asking us to say yes to something next, whether it's little or big. I say that's the invitation. And if we all do it together, we'll be supportive of that momentum and energy moving forward.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We are supporting you. We're loving you. You are not alone. And just know that this pathway is one that we are creating together. And in that togetherness, we are creating the amazement park. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.